My name is Danielle Carter. I'm 34 years old, a registered nurse, a mother of one, and proud of every inch of my identity, especially the parts they tried to make me ashamed of. I was raised to carry myself with dignity, even when others refused to see my worth, and nothing prepared me for the quiet warfare I walked into the day I married, into a family that wore smiles like masks and prejudice like perfume. When I first met Michael's parents, I felt it instantly, the chill, not overt, not loud, but in the eyes, the hesitation, the way his mother's smile tightened when she saw me, the way his father avoided shaking my hand. They were polite, yes, but only in the way people are when they're trying not to say what they really think. I'd later learn that to them I was never the right fit, not for their legacy, not for their son, and certainly not for their last name. The worst part, Michael didn't see it, not at first. Love can make you blind, or maybe he was just used to that kind of silence. "You're imagining things," he said once, when I came home from a dinner where his sister spent an hour talking around me like I wasn't even at the table. I laughed it off. I tried. I smiled through it. I didn't want to believe that marrying the man I loved meant stepping into a war I never enlisted in, but my skin spoke louder in that house than any word I could say. It got worse after the wedding. His mother didn't show up, his father left after the ceremony, his sister posted a cryptic status that read, "Some people ruin family trees just to feel special." I didn't respond. I never do. Silence can be louder than rage, and I chose to let my actions speak, but it pierced me, not because of what they said, but because of how easily they erased the woman their son chose to love. And yet I still cooked for them. I still sent birthday cards. I still tried. What they didn't know, what they never cared to ask, was who I truly was, the degrees I earned while working 2 jobs, the mother I cared for during her chemo, the scholarships I created for inner city kids, the life I had built from the ground up, without ever stepping on a soul. I didn't need their approval, but I had hoped for human decency. Instead, I was met with whispers, with microaggressions wrapped in condescension, and one day it reached a boiling point. It happened at a family barbecue. Michael's cousin, half drunk, asked me if I had ever met my real dad. I didn't flinch. I handed him the plate of food I had just grilled and smiled. But inside, something shifted. I realized I was trying to win over a table that had already voted me out, and I made a quiet promise that day. I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't fight. I would show them. I would let the truth unfold, not in words but in presence, in poise, and in the power of what they thought they could break. There's a unique kind of loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people who smile to your face but hope you'll vanish the moment you turn your back. That was my reality. Every holiday, every gathering, every quiet Sunday dinner with Michael's family, I sat at tables where my voice was never truly heard, where I was always introduced as Michael's wife, and never just Danielle, where I could offer an idea, and it wouldn't be acknowledged until someone else, someone white, rephrased it 2 minutes later. Michael didn't mean to ignore it, but he did. He was raised in it. To him it was just how things were. "They'll come around," he'd say, rubbing my hand under the table, while his mother told a story about how people like us don't understand tradition. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe love was enough, that maybe time would soften their hatred, maybe a grandchild would open their eyes, but every time I smiled through their subtle jabs, I wasn't being strong, I was slowly shrinking. I remember sitting in the bathroom at Michael's parents' house, looking in the mirror, and asking myself if I was losing who I was just to stay accepted by people who never wanted me in the first place. I had always been proud of my skin, proud of my hair, my roots, my voice, but in that house I found myself adjusting, straightening, silencing, just to avoid more conflict, just to keep the peace. But peace without dignity is just quiet suffering, and I was starting to drown in it. One night, after yet another passive-aggressive remark from Michael's sister, something about urban names and how they make life harder, I excused myself, walked out into the cold, and cried in the car. Michael followed, but I didn't speak. He sat beside me in silence, knowing this wasn't just about one comment. It was years of swallowing pain, years of letting disrespect pass, so we wouldn't argue. And for the first time, I saw it in his face. He finally got it. He finally saw that silence wasn't love, it was abandonment. From that moment on, something inside me hardened, not in bitterness, but in resolve. I stopped showing up with gifts. I stopped volunteering to host. I stopped trying to prove my worth to people who had already decided I had none. I poured my love into those who gave it back, into our child, into my patients, into myself. Michael noticed the shift, and slowly, so did they. The less I engaged, the more curious they became. But I wasn't playing a game, I was reclaiming my space. Because here's what they never understood: I never needed their acceptance, I simply hoped for human decency, and when even that was too much to ask, I chose myself, quietly, without drama, without rage, just a firm, unwavering decision to stop participating in my own rejection. And when you stop giving people the opportunity to disrespect you, they start noticing just how much power you actually held all along. Silence can be both a shield and a weapon, something I learned in the months that followed. I didn't announce my boundaries, I enforced them. No more last-minute family dinners, no more pretending I didn't hear the offhand comments. I stopped softening myself to make them more comfortable. And that's when something strange began to happen. They started trying, not sincerely, but with effort. Invitations, polite texts, small talk. But it was too late for performance. I wasn't looking for peace offerings, I was building something else entirely. At work, I was thriving. I had just been offered a leadership position, overseeing a new hospital training initiative that would put me in front of national healthcare boards. It was more than a promotion, it was a platform. I began mentoring other young Black nurses. I started speaking out gently, firmly, about representation in medicine. What I realized was this: every time I poured energy into proving my worth to people who didn't value me, I was robbing my purpose of its power. That stopped, completely. And then came the inheritance conversation. Michael's grandfather had passed, and the family was squabbling over his estate. His will left a sizable amount in trust for Michael and his household, but the wording was vague. Michael's mother quickly started pushing a narrative that I shouldn't be included in any family planning decisions, because technically Danielle's not part of the lineage. I didn't flinch, but I took notes. I read every line of the will, and I remembered a detail they had forgotten. I had helped Michael's grandfather during his final months. I had driven to every appointment. I had held his hand when his son didn't show up. A week later, Michael received a letter from the executor's office. His grandfather had made a private addendum, one that named me as a trustee for a portion of the fund in honor of the care and companionship I had given him. The room went silent when Michael read it aloud. His mother paled, his sister fidgeted. I sat with a calm smile, drinking my tea. I hadn't asked for anything. I had simply been present when others chose pride over love. And now, without lifting a finger, I was holding more influence than any of them expected. But I wasn't finished. I quietly contacted a local Black-led nonprofit that worked with underserved hospitals and offered a portion of my trust share to start a scholarship fund in the late grandfather's name. I made sure the family was listed as honorary contributors. When the press release went out, the family's name was attached, publicly associated with a legacy of service and equity. The same family that once whispered about how I didn't belong was now being celebrated for a cause they never supported. It was poetic. This wasn't revenge, it was restoration. I wasn't trying to destroy their image, I was just telling the truth louder than their lies. And the best part, I did it without ever raising my voice, without ever stepping out of character. While they plotted in back rooms, I was building bridges in boardrooms. I didn't need them to love me, I just needed them to see I never needed their permission to be powerful. When people who once saw you as beneath them suddenly realize they can't touch you, they panic. Not all at once. It starts slowly, in passive-aggressive whispers, in cold shoulders that don't land anymore, in family group chats where they used to dominate the tone, now suddenly careful with their words. That's what began happening. Michael's mother started asking Michael to explain my decisions. His sister went quiet for weeks. The same people who once questioned my place were now afraid I might speak too loudly about the truth. It all came to a head during the annual family gathering at the lake house. I wasn't going to go, but Michael asked me to come for him, so I did. But I came different. Not to impress, not to smile through insults. I came dressed in peace, in purpose, and in my own power. I brought our daughter, radiant in her curly crown and gap-toothed smile. We were everything they said we could never be: elegant, educated, strong, loving. And suddenly the silence wasn't mine anymore, it was theirs. At dinner, the topic of the scholarship fund came up. Of course no one mentioned that I had started it, just awkward praises about how nice it was that the family name was gaining such attention. I let them speak. I watched them dance around the truth, until one of Michael's younger cousins, a teenager, turned to me and said, "You started that, right? I read your name in the article." The table froze, and I smiled, looked at him, and said, yes, it was something I believed needed to exist, and your grandfather inspired it. That was all, nothing more, but it landed like thunder. After that, I noticed the shift in Michael too. He became sharper, protective in ways I hadn't seen before. He'd speak up now, subtle, but firm. When his mother questioned my decision not to bring a dessert, he said, she brought something more meaningful than pie, Mom. That was new, and I didn't need defending, but watching the man I loved wake up to what I had endured, silently for years, that mattered. That healed something in both of us. Meanwhile, the board at my hospital invited me to sit on their executive DI panel. My work was gaining traction. I was invited to speak at conferences. My face, my story, my vision, it was spreading. I never once mentioned the rejection I had faced in Michael's family. I didn't need to. My growth was the proof. My dignity was the rebuke. And as my influence rose, I could feel their grip loosening. Their power had never been real. It only worked as long as I believed I was lesser. I didn't believe that anymore. And yet, I stayed kind. Not for them, but for me. I still brought thoughtful gifts when I felt like it. I still showed up, not out of guilt, but out of grace. That was the part they never saw coming. I hadn't become bitter. I had simply become untouchable. And when a woman knows her worth, the room shifts before she even speaks. It's strange how justice often arrives without a sound. No grand confrontation, no slammed doors, just quiet realizations, one after another until the truth becomes unbearable for those who denied it for too long. That's exactly what happened in Michael's family. There was no big fallout, no screaming match, just silence, and the weight of their own reflection. One by one, they began to unravel, not because I did anything to them, but because they could no longer pretend I hadn't done everything they never could. Michael's mother began to withdraw from the gatherings. Her once sharp criticisms turned into awkward silences. She stopped calling altogether. I wasn't surprised. Pride is a heavy burden to carry, especially when the person you once dismissed becomes the one everyone else now respects. I heard through Michael that she had started seeing a counselor, that she'd mentioned me vaguely, in a session, something about feeling left out. The irony didn't escape me. She'd spent years trying to exclude me, only to find herself on the outside of the family she once controlled. His sister's career took a hit too, nothing to do with me, but poetic nonetheless. She had built her brand as a social media family values influencer, but after a few older posts resurfaced, ones with questionable undertones, her sponsorships quietly vanished. I said nothing. I liked nothing. I shared nothing, but I remembered her face when she once mocked my natural hair at brunch, laughing behind her mimosa. Now the silence she once forced onto me had come home to her doorstep. But the moment that truly defined this quiet justice came months later, during our daughter's school awards night. She was being honored for an essay about family legacy. She had written about resilience, grace, and how being different in a room that doesn't welcome you is a superpower, not a flaw. Michael's family was there. They had insisted. And as she stood on stage and thanked her mother for showing me what dignity really looks like, I didn't look at them. I didn't have to. I felt it. After the ceremony, Michael's father approached me for the first time in years. He shook my hand. Held it a little too long. He didn't apologize, not directly, but he said, "You raised her well, really well." And then he walked away. That was it. That was all he could manage. But it was enough. Not because I needed validation, but because I had already won. Quietly, completely, without ever raising my voice. And through it all, I remained soft. I didn't harden. I didn't close off my heart. I simply stopped giving access to people who didn't deserve it. I stopped arguing for space and started creating it for myself. And somehow in doing so I became the example they had always tried to be, but could never reach. Not with money, not with control, not with appearances, because real power isn't loud, it's graceful, and it never begs to be seen. There comes a point in your journey when you stop looking over your shoulder, when the past no longer echoes so loudly in your mind, when the weight of other people's judgment fades beneath the sound of your own steady breath. That's where I am now. Not healed because of them, but healed in spite of them. The same people who once treated me like I was invisible, now stand on the sidelines of a life I built with my own hands, and the most beautiful part, I hold no anger in my heart. Michael and I are stronger than we've ever been, not because our path was perfect, but because it was honest. There were nights where we sat in silence, reckoning with the damage others had caused, but we grew. We chose each other. He began to advocate in places I had once stood alone, and our home became a place of refuge, not resistance. I no longer shrink in his presence, and he no longer hides from the truth. That is love, real love, love that listens, love that grows up. Our daughter knows her worth. She doesn't whisper her dreams, she doesn't tiptoe in rooms that don't welcome her. She walks with the confidence of a child who has seen her mother rise with grace, and when she asks about family, about why certain people don't come around as often, I don't lie. I tell her, sometimes people fear what they don't understand, but we don't make ourselves smaller to make them feel bigger. We stand tall, and we love anyway. She nods, and I see it in her eyes. She's already freer than I was at her age. As for the family that once rejected me, I wish them peace, truly. I don't carry bitterness, only boundaries. They are no longer enemies, they're just people I no longer hand pieces of my soul to. And in this space I've reclaimed, I've built a community, mentorship circles, speaking engagements, even a small publishing project focused on stories of resilience. My story, other women's stories, voices that once stayed silent, are now echoing in rooms we were never invited into, but now own. There's something divine about walking away without slamming the door, about leaving your mark, not with revenge, but with legacy. I didn't break them, I just outgrew the box they tried to keep me in, and while they wasted time guarding the gates, I built my own city, filled with truth, with light, with love. I no longer seek their approval, I no longer need their recognition, because I've already become the woman they said I could never be. And if you're listening to this now, carrying a similar wound, let me say this: you don't have to fight to prove yourself, you don't have to argue to be seen, just keep building, keep rising, keep moving in silence, and let your life speak the loudest, because sometimes the best revenge is peace. If you love this story, like, comment I choose peace, and subscribe for more true stories of silent strength and personal redemption.